Hello, and welcome back to the Survivor's Mic podcast. I'm your host, Posh, and I'm excited that we're on episode 16, and this is the Beyond Survival series. And I really hope that you guys are enjoying the journey that we are on together. After acknowledging that we have gone through stuff, we have survived stuff, but we are working on figuring out how to live on and how to live life and be fulfilled despite the fact that we have gone through what we have gone through. So I really hope you're enjoying it. I do see some comments sometimes, which I'm really grateful for because I know that the conversations are going on and these episodes are stirring up some, life reflections and brainstorming. So I'm really grateful for that. So, anyway, I would love to talk about something that I would call becoming your own ally. And this is something that I wrote about for those of you who do follow the newsletter for this podcast. You would have read about that on Substack. So this idea came to me when I was sitting on looking back at life and seeing the trends of the conversations that we have with self, which is a huge thing for me. And I think for most people, really, whether we are conscious about it or not, it's either you do have a healthy relationship with that aspect of your life, or you're neutral, or you have an unhealthy one, right? So, this is just really those conversations that you have with yourself, the things you say to yourself. And it can be as extreme, or it can be as little and silly as it can get, right? For example, you have been, I don't know, what example could I use? You have been preparing for your dream job, for example, right? You have always pictured your career and the way that you want to go. And then on the day of that interview, you just forget certain things that you would have assumed were important. Or, I don't know if this happens to most people, but I remember when I was still in school and I was still younger, I would first come out of the exam, and then the responses and the answers begin coming to my head. And it was the most frustrating thing. So you kind of like say, oh, I'm so stupid, right? And it almost feels like reflex action, right? Like, how dumb could I be? But this is also, even to the extent of saying things verbally, it also shows the types of conversations and the tone that you use, and whether or not you are kind to yourself when you speak to you within, right? And I think for people who are meant for this podcast, like the audience for this podcast, which obviously are survivors of traumatic events, losing loved ones, being betrayed, being accused, being misunderstood, and the list goes on and on, you would know that this comes to you almost easily. And it's not comforting to say that, because it's actually disturbing, right? Because most of the times we're in this bubble and we're in this space where you've either concluded, okay, nobody understands me, so I don't bother explaining myself anymore. And the danger of that is, if you are not able to surround yourself with people whom you can, lay off some of your burdens to, not for them to solve all your problems, but for them to just kind of like hear you out. And it's another whole conversation whether they understand you or not. But the fact that you're able to share with them, right? And you do have that environment and you do have that space, which I think is very important for every individual. But if you then do not have such people, or you have lost trust and faith in those scenarios because you have been betrayed before. The danger about that is that you then stay in your own bubble and the conversations are now happening between you and your soul, right? And your brain. And sometimes that can take you to extremely dark places for sure. And so you want the easiest way to figure this out would be to try and take like an audit of, you could do like a table of the nice things, the positive things that you say to yourself, and the negative things that you say to yourself in a day, right? Whether you're silent or you're saying it verbally, whatever it can be. And then you try to look at the ratio of what that is, right? It's very interesting to see that sometimes we are very harsh on ourselves. And I wouldn't even say this in a manner of blaming us. I think we are the only creatures as human beings who are so hard on themselves over and over again. Whether they've made a mistake before or somebody has done something to you before, we keep on hammering it over and over and over again on that same wound. And I find it to be very brutal, right? I find it to be very brutal. I think one of the things that is so funny that I wanted to say about, to speak about, was when I was a little younger, everyone around me used to tell me that I talk too much, that I'm too loud, that I talk too much for a child, right? Then I became a teenager. I remember in high school, I would have people, lying on my bed and I'm narrating movies to them. That's the level of speaking that I was doing, right? And so there was a season in my life, I think around 18, 19, 20 years old, where I really wanted to push myself to be an introverted person. I wanted to be quieter. I wanted to be more reserved, you could call it. I wanted it to I don't know, whatever word that can fit, to keep my composure, to not be too excited around people, you know. And I know that it was so tough for me because, again, you can't just, we didn't make ourselves, we didn't create ourselves. So you can't undo who you are, right? But I remember what the thought that made me stop to do that or stop doing that was when I had a conversation with an introverted friend of mine. And she told me things that were mind blowing to me. And she was talking about, how she spends hours and hours thinking overnight, and she feels like she's going crazy, so to say. She's very introverted. She barely, talks to anybody. And until today, as a mother of three, she's still the same. And then for me, on the other side, I was this person who would be mad and I would just say it loud, right? I would just name it and we get it over and done with, right? And that's when I thought to myself, oh, I think this will be a little too much for me to carry. Because again, before life just happening to me, life was happening to me when I was going through all the abuse in my childhood, when I became homeless at some point at age 24, when I, was bullied in school, when my parents divorced, and, I had all these battles of being, abused by my stepmothers, and the list is going on and on and on. And I thought, oh, I think it's not really bad that I'm able to share my battles and what I'm going through, right? And so this is what comes back, or it takes you back to the idea of maybe vulnerability on its own is not something that we should look at as a negative thing. And I think sometimes, you can hear comments like, yeah, everybody has problems. You're not the first one to go through all those things. And sometimes it's people telling us that, or we are telling ourselves that. We spoke about that last week right? On the list of the 10 lies that survival has taught us, right? And so these conversations are going on anyway. Either the ideas are brought in by other people or from external sources, or they are internal. And also, I think the idea of these thoughts coming internally, the source of that is also survival, because that's all we have known, right? Over these years. And so all you have known is, okay, I have weaknesses. I'm weak. That's why I was abused. Um, I'm not good enough, and there's no point for me to share all of this because everybody has their own problems. And all these lies are within your mind because survival has been feeding you all these ideas of what you should say to yourself. So that voice ultimately is really not yours, but it's the voice of survival, because we have known, or all that we have known is living in that space where if life is going well, if you're at peace, if you are loved somehow by somebody, that's not your life. That's not how your life goes. So you're not used to that. You kind of like have to find something negative to feed into, that monster would call survival then, because that's what you're familiar with. And so really, this is where I came to this place of telling myself or realizing that it really takes a personal decision to say, I, I do want to change my thought process. And I kind of like named that process the mind work, right? Like, I want to work on my brain and I want to exercise being able to tell myself all these nice and kind things. And one of the people who taught me that was my therapist. And this is not a long time ago, some 2 months ago, really. And he said to me, I want you to just come up with affirmations. And I know people do this, it's a very common thing, it's not new information. Even the things that you don't quite believe in, but then you get to say those things over and over again, and you would actually realize that you would kind of like become that, or you would start to believe all those things, right? And I find it to be empowering. I find it to be quite liberating to be able to do that. But really, while I'm still on this season, or in this season of really having kind conversations with myself, which goes back to the idea of becoming my own ally, right? Becoming your own source of strength, and source of motivation, and source of inspiration, really. I have not been able to be in a space of being quiet and being in this state of tranquility, you would call it, just because a lot is happening, yeah, right? And we all know this. You kind of like have your 9 to 5, and I'm building a business with a good friend of mine, and I'm mentoring a few girls, and then I still need my social life somewhere in between. There's a lot happening that I never come to a state of quietness. And so one of the things that happened this week, literally yesterday in the morning, I woke up to this email where I've been on the waiting list for 6 weeks for the Vipassana meditation, for those of you who know about that retreat. So it's a retreat for 10 days. It happens here in Germany, in the state of Essen. And you don't do anything other than meditating, and then groups or individually or in your room. And you don't listen to no music, you're not on your phone. You are not really reading anything per se, but you're just really focused on either these group sessions where you get to obviously have conversations with teachers of meditation, and maybe therapists are also part of that process. And you go through a number of exercises as a group of people. and this happens for 10 days, and you're on a vegetarian diet, which is something I'm excited to. I've been really trying to work on my diet. So I look forward to it, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I've required to be in a space like that, but I'm also just not sure how it's gonna go because I've never done it before. But also because my subconscious has been trying to exercise this, and obviously, most definitely, I'm not good at it, but I've been working on this idea of training my brain to come to a state of, quiet, so that I'm able to process things. I'm able to have conversations with myself that I'm probably kinder, prepared to the compared to the past. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I'll definitely give you an update of how it was. But I just feel like for me, it's very timely because this is also the very same season that I'm really trying to be conscious and to be so careful about the conversations I'm having with my own self. And I'm really working on replacing all this information that I've been conditioned to, because over the years, all I've done is to live in survival mode. And now I do want to go beyond that. I am going beyond that. And so it makes sense that my brain muscle gets to be trained to be able to do those things. And so I am grateful for that. And I will leave you with that thought. And I'm looking forward to seeing your comments. They make me grateful and they make me excited. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I'm your host, Posh. Bye for now.